frozen.
No, we're here.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Mark and Heidi, your hosts at the Wisdom Factory, coming to you from Umbria in Chile, Italy. Uber. But anyway, we do these broadcasts every Friday, and we look hard and find really wonderful guests. And today we are most pleased to have back with us E.Dawlabani and Elza E.Maalouf. And we were almost going to have Dr. Don Beck too, but he just had too tight a schedule to make an airplane. So it's going to be up to the four of us, but we're extremely competent people. So
we are competent in asking questions, hopefully.
Yes, that's
and you in answer them.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that once the conversation gets going, we're not going to have a lot we need to do, but just kind of run the show.
So. Anyway, I want to add that we are the Wisdom Factory. It is a part of the activities of Paradiso Integrale, which is a non-profit association, cultural association. And I would like you, if you like this sort of transmission, to support our work at http://Heidi63. So, thank you. And
63.
63.
That's you.
That's me.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So now introduce, please.
And so, yes, in case you haven't been with us in previous broadcasts, I should tell you that our two guests tonight are consummate experts on what's going on in the Middle East, and with the help of Spiral Dynamics, have an integral view of the whole mimetic scheme of the Middle Eastern countries, and also of the European countries, which is really important to know about also. So they have a message tonight which I think you'll find very helpful, in that as they look at the population of Syria, at who these refugees really are, you'll be, I think, reassured that some of your wildest fears, and boy, there have been a lot of fears going on out there, are unlikely to be realized. And with that, I think I would like to ask, who would like to start, Elza or Saeed?
I think
you wanted to explain a little bit what spiral dynamics is, no?
Yeah.
And the levels, yeah. So
that's where we should start, because not everyone, of course, is familiar with this system.
Okay. So briefly, it will take less than 3 minutes to explain that, and then Elza can talk about the profiles of the Syrian culture, because they're in her book, and she can talk a little bit. Mark, did you mute yourself? Oh, sorry. Okay. Are we still on? Yes. So we'll talk a little bit about spiral dynamics, and I'll defer to Elza to talk about the cultural makeup of Syria. It's in her book, and it's more of her area of expertise, more than mine. So spiral dynamics is a developmental model, basically, that applies to individuals and cultures. It is hierarchically ordered developmental levels that today get a lot of resistance, because we live in a culture that presumes we are all equal, when we are truly equal as human beings, but developmentally we're not, especially when it comes to cultural development. So we will leave alone there are a total of 8 levels of existence under the spiral dynamics model. We'll leave alone the lower 2 levels and the top level, because they're really of no significant contribution to what's going on now. But basically the first level of culture is survival. The second level is tribal existence. The third level is feudalistic, egocentric existence.
So life conditions affect certain capacities in the brain.
So on the individual level, it is the capacity within the brain that allows an individual or group to adapt to changes in cultural changes. So the Middle East is primarily centered in the tribalistic, feudalistic values. And the West tends to think that if we just give them the opportunity to express themselves, that they're going to be at the same level that the West is. Well, the West is at the West has been at the fourth level of development, which has respect for the institutions, the deferment of power from the individual ego to the institution, and the idea that institutions determine destiny of nations. Those values have been with Europe and the West for 300-400 years. We emerged into the next level above the fourth level, which is the fifth level system that is primarily driven by strategic and scientific values. Those are things that unfortunately in the Middle East began to emerge back when Islam was an open system, but have since been closed because the West advanced at a far greater rate than the Middle East, while the Middle East stood still. So the real battle or the conflict here is really between the European, the Western fourth, fifth, and sixth level systems. We'll talk a little bit about the sixth level system. That is the level of egalitarian values, where everybody thinks we are equal. It is the much higher consciousness level that transcends, but also should include the lower levels in it. But unfortunately, Europe, it's not, and that is the primarily cause of the problem. In my opinion, the Europeans were forced into the sixth level system out of necessity, out of primarily losing the war in World War II. And they've been acting at surface level, really forgetting what really needs to be done at the base. So the conflict is primarily between fourth, fifth, and sixth level Western content value systems and second and third level Islamic Middle Eastern content systems. So this is really framing it in spiral dynamics language in less than 10 minutes.
That was fantastic.
Yeah. I try to bring up the picture of the spiral, but here with Chromebook, it's difficult to screen share.
Yeah.
So people can go to your website or also to a previous talk we had in July with Said, where he explains these levels very, very, very thoroughly in regard to economics, which is his specialty, no? So I think it's very informative.
Yep.
So why shouldn't people have fear? You want to say something?
Well, I'm just going to try to say something smart, but, but you beat me to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I gave here, I'm recording this too with Periscope, and I put the title, Don't Have Fear of the Syrian Refugees. So why shouldn't we in Europe, which we are inundated, not have fear of the refugees? And after the events of Paris, people became crazy, you know, and sort of accuse, fear even more the refugees because they are the bad ones, you know, and they might every moment come and kill us. So why is it not so?
Yeah. I was in 2007 in Daraa, the epicenter of the Syrian revolution. And Anne Kaspari showed me how the blade of wheat, they're very short. And this is climate change.
So what Elza is trying to say is that the basis of the whole problem is farmers not being able to afford
the bread to eat,
to be traditional farmers the way they've been the last 3,000, 4,000 years. Even
though Assad the son had installed computers in every corner, and young girls spoke English very well, but the Syrians were disgruntled because they don't have bread to put on the table. That's in 2007. And I was wondering if the second man in the Ba'ath party, his name is Kulthum. He was the governor of Daraa. I was wondering why the second man in the Ba'ath party graduated from the Sorbonne. He has 2 PhDs. He was the governor of Daraa. That's why the epicenter of the Syrian revolution started in Daraa. They were smuggling arms to Daraa. It's on the border of Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
The Muslim Brotherhood were smuggling arms to Daraa.
But say what you talk about in your book about why Syria is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's why there's very little chance for the Syrian to be terrorists. For the last 40 years, both Hafiz al-Assad, the father, and Bashar, the son, were creating secularism. So secularism is the Ba'ath ideology. I talk about this in my book as well. Ba'ath was brought to the region by Aflaq. He studied at the Sorbonne, so he came from 2 or 3 level developmental levels, more complex than the center of gravity of his culture. He was a Christian from Michel Aflaq, so he brought 2 or 3 level developmental levels more than the center of gravity of his culture.
And that's what I mentioned earlier, is that in France, at the time that the Ba'ath ideology was brought to the Middle East, France was at postmodern and post-postmodern values, and had far more complexity than the Middle East did. And here's the ideological father of the Ba'ath movement bringing Arab nationalism to a culture that had not known anything about nationalism. I'm sorry, a lot of people are going to think that that we're wrong on this because of the sense that we're all equal. The Arab culture has not had experiences with what a nation is. They're in the tribalistic value systems, and that has to vet itself out naturally to come to a healthy respect for the other tribes before nations can be formed. But I think what Elza is hinting to is that Assad and generally the Ba'ath party in general promoted secular views.
Yeah.
I mean, but what they faced is that the culture emerging from the tribal values to the feudal values, and it hit head on with those values that wanted nothing to do with tribes anymore. They wanted nothing to do with foreign imposed order anymore. And the result was dictatorship. So dictatorships resulted from using a foreign ideology towards secularism.
Yeah, it was the necessary evil for Saddam and Bashar al-Assad to keep their red feudalistic system under control.
Yeah. So although they failed in a lot of aspects, if you're a Syrian national, you're forbidden from talking about religious ideologies, political ideologies. I mean, if Assad was successful in one thing that he should be handed due credit for, is the idea that he will not allow radical imams to come to Syria. You simply cannot preach hate. You cannot preach anything that is ideologically based, be it Shia, be it Sunni, be it Christian. Mm-hmm. They all lived in harmony, but they all aspired for nationalistic Syrian values.
When they sang the national anthem, they were very patriotic. I felt they were very nationalistic as well.
Can I say something? I think this is a plus and not a minus, because when there are people listening and they come from a higher development, so let's say the green mindset, they don't want institutions anymore. They want to do the individual stuff and so on, and think institutions, they should be abolished. But I think you make it quite clear that the institutions for these societies, to build institutions, is a big thing. It's in the next step to do. So we need not to see that from our own perspective, but from the whole, where they have to go.
You know, Heidi, in my opinion, one of the biggest crimes that the United Nations has committed against humanity is the idea that nations exist in accordance with the way that colonial powers design them. This is at the heart of the division in the Middle East. Warring Shia tribes, or, I mean, leave religion alone, just tribes that have warred for thousands of years cannot suddenly be forced into sharing country and appointing, whoever is the winner of the warring contest as president or leader of that entire land. Before you get to nations, there has to be tribal formations. That is just a natural progression, if you will, of how cultures evolve.
It's like the Kurds, the semi-autonomous Kurdish state in the Barazanis rule with an iron fist. Yeah. So a blogger can be killed immediately.
But at the same time, they're an open system. They're very much like Western values. They're pro-development. They're pro-education. And they control their imams. Half of the Christians that escaped Iraq went to the Kurdistan region of Iraq and northern Syria because they're welcome there. There's tolerance for other, for secular values, and those are enforced by the Muslim leaders themselves. So there's that sense of there has to be many Kurdistans in the Middle East before they emerge into modern-day Iraq or modern-day Syria or modern-day Lebanon. The UN and the Western powers should stop fighting the idea that the current configurations of Middle Eastern countries can be sustainable. They cannot. And there's nothing. It's very tricky to try to design governance systems based on incongruent cultures. Now, they're incongruent because of their background, because of when you're in that tribal value system, you reach to the past to derive at your values. In the West, we're in higher systems, so we're always aspiring to the future. Traditional tribal cultures reach to the past, and the past says, this is my father's land. If I'm Sunni, no Shia can rule over my father's or my grandfather's land. It's as simple as that. You have to develop the culture to the point where they naturally let go of the attachment to the land. You cannot force them to let go of the attachment to the land. This applies to most and to really what's happening with the dynamic between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
I have the Arab Menome Project in my book. It's an ambitious project where we can teach millennials how to create their own institutions. That's the point I was making to Nafiz last time. Nafiz needs to teach millennials how to create their own institutions and the respect for the law. Not everybody is equal under the law in our countries, most of our countries.
If a son of a minister runs you over, too bad. If you as parents show up to object to that, you'll be imprisoned. I mean, that's not. There has to be a point of development in the Middle East where everybody is treated equally under the law, and unfortunately, that's not the case.
So, Said, I'm asking the stupid questions. I just don't understand when you say Syria is has promoted the value of not religion, secular values.
Secularism,
And,
yeah.
And now, what has happened? I mean, we hear that this is extremism, Islamic extremism. Where are they? I mean, can you explain a little bit more who is what, and
how did that happen?
How did that happen?
Well, in Iraq, the general, we dismantled the Ba'ath army. The general joined ISIS, or Islamic State. So they're leading ISIS, all these Toyotas. You see a fleet of Toyotas. They're the generals of the Ba'ath army. And we made a mistake by killing Saddam. Now we're making the same mistake by relieving Assad from his duties.
Yeah, and the West is taking the position that they can help bring peace to Syria if Assad goes. Assad's not going to go. Assad is the glue that holds that culture. As much of a butcher as he is the lesser of two evils. And unfortunately, that is the nature of a red system, of that third level feudalistic system, when the rest of the world is against it. The West has to understand how to help that system emerge into healthy values, and they're not doing it. The primary objective of the West since the end of World War II, since the creation of the United Nations and the State of Israel, has been that keeping of divide and conquer, keeping the region weak, because it's not in the interest of the West to have a strong Middle East. And you know, and we've all seen where that pathology has led. We're just, you know, the chickens are coming home, so to speak, with what's happening now. It is all due because of our ignorant, short-sighted foreign policy.
Yeah, I want to bring up a comment from Vivek, because we have quite a few viewers here. Mark, would you like to read it?
Sure. Vivekananda Bindu Rao, he says, the West has been meddling in affairs of cultures that they do not understand. One of the so-called secular values seems to suggest that whoever does not believe in the secular values is a religious fanatic. To twist what Henry Ford said in regard to color of the Model T Ford, you can choose any secularism as long as it aligns largely with Christian values. This form of secularism does not allow for multiculturalism at all.
Well, yeah,
that's a strong statement.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is partially true. But if you look at the evolution of religions, Islam is in a very arrested state. I mean, take out the few countries that are primarily Islamic that are in the fourth level system. The country that comes to mind is Indonesia, partially Turkey, and maybe Tunisia in Africa. North Africa, yeah. Those are the nations where Islam is not a full living system. They do not have a constitution that says kill the infidels. They are not radical in their views. So a lot has to do with the evolution of Islam itself. At one point, as Elza points out beautifully in her book and her presentations, Islam got arrested. I mean, there was a declaration that Islam will no longer be, will not follow the Hellenistic traditions of intellectual discourse. And that's what arrested the system. It suddenly became the word of God. And the God that existed 1700 years ago is not the same God today. And Islamic scholars have to believe that. There has to be a reformation in Islam that's gonna cause internal feuds among Islam itself. We saw it happen in Europe with the Spanish Inquisitions, with the Dark Ages. There has to be Dark Ages of Islam. There has to be.
But the Spanish Inquisitions did not have the sophisticated arms we have today.
Yeah. Yeah, so there has to be a reformation of Islam. Islam conflicts with current global values in its original form. Christianity in its original form conflicts with current global values. So the reason we still exist is because we've evolved from Christianity. You listen to Joel Osteen on Sunday, and he's preaching the wonders that Christianity from the 5th and 6th level system brings. Yeah. He quotes something from the Bible for 2 minutes, and for an hour he talks about how great it is to have a great job, a good family, the more money you make, the better. That is reinterpreting Christianity through the 5th level system. Islam needs to move towards that. It cannot remain arrested the way it is.
Through the enterprising system.
Yeah.
Through the egalitarian system as well.
So anyway, I think to bring it back full circle to the refugee issue, that secularism, simply because the Ba'ath ideology and the way Assad applied it, Syrians that were born in Syria, that are a part of the Syrian population, are not prone to radicalization simply because the culture did not allow it. So the vacuum was created when Assad, the son, couldn't really bring reforms fast enough to the culture. Yeah. He's incompetent in many ways. He was far better a leader than his dad was, than his father. He increased the size of the Syrian middle class in less than 12 years of leadership. He increased the size of the Syrian middle class by 10 times the size it was under his dad. So he was working slowly on evolving the culture. What has happened is you get the Arab Spring, you get the technological breakthroughs that everybody now who's been sold a story about what the West is suddenly has access to technology and says, hey, the West isn't so bad, they're great people. It's our people who are the repressors. Suddenly the culture has a way to look inwardly at their leaders, and that's what caused a revolution. And so all that. So Assad was nothing but a shell of dictatorship. And when the civil war started, ISIS found it to be a perfect opportunity for them to take advantage of that vacuum in power, and so they moved into Syria.
And that makes sense.
Yeah, and of course, I'm looking at this from a Western point of view, and now also from a European point of view. If what the West can do is basically allow some things to happen and not get too upset about the extremities that emerge in the meanwhile, or is that being too simplistic?
Well, no, that's half of the solution, Mark. I think the other half is Europe has got to look inwardly itself. There was an article that came out today in by the Gatestone Institute, their international policy consultants, that say that France should look to bomb a town in Belgium. What's the name of the town? Molenbeek. Belgium, instead of bomb. And Elza and I were talking about, if we write an article, what's the next article to the Huffington Post is going to be? It was going to be, Hollande should look to bombing, and not physical bombs, but actual structural, cultural work bomb Northeast Paris, because that's where the cesspool that empowers radical Islam is formed. Now, this article in the Gatestone Institute says that the mayor of that town is Philippe Moreau is an anti-Semite, and because of that, he creates a natural attraction to Muslim radicals, Muslim radicalization that is born in Europe. It's the Muslim population that re-elects this guy. It is that city that looks away from terrorist activities that these kids are training in. Instead of pointing them to opportunities and away from terrorism, they favor their position of anti-Semitism.
They called him the godfather of jihad.
That is a powerful statement to say about a European government official. He's the mayor of the town, and this article is calling him the godfather of jihad. The new jihad, Heidi and Mark, is far more dangerous because it's born in Europe, and it goes and gets radicalized in Syria. Syria doesn't. There's nowhere in the Middle East that is originating the level of complexity that the European radicalized jihadists are producing. They're aligning with the generals that Elza talked about, Saddam's generals who formed ISIS, and they're creating this deadly formula that has the potential of penetrating culture without us knowing. You know, all you have to do is listen to those videos of those ISIS killers with knives in their hands. They speak perfect English with French, with the appropriate regional accent from the town that they come in from. If these people penetrate the culture, there's no way of you telling who's a terrorist and who's not. So the new wave of terrorism is far more complex than the Al Qaeda brand of terrorism.
Okay. Well, you know, this of course is around to the specific topic that we're going to talk about, the refugees and the fears that arise, because there are places in, say, Stockholm where the police don't go anymore. And I'm sure it's not only Stockholm places that the police don't go anymore.
But are these the refugees or
but
other
are these
people?
The refugees? Well, I don't know. Can Westerners tell the difference?
Yeah, and what is the difference?
Yeah.
That was my question. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know much about who they've received as refugees before, but since the conflict in the Middle East started, it sounds like it's mostly Syrians who are coming from there. Some Iraqi,
many Afghanis, many from East Africa. Where else? Afghanis, Pakistanis.
It's as you know, Mark. It's very difficult to just throw out a general blanket statement on who these refugees are. I think it behooves the West to put a system in place that qualifies these people. You know, in spite of what we said about the Syrians, that they really do not represent a threat. With that, there's still a qualifying process for refugees that will only pick almost 1 out of every 1,000 that apply. And apparently the Republicans here still think that is a threat. So, you know, on the top of what we've dismissed as a possibility of Syrians becoming terrorists, there's the added layer of vetting these people and knowing who they are, and there's still fear-mongering that's going on. So I think it's more fear-based than not. But Europe has extra work to do. They can't suddenly let go of, you know, colonialism and not occupying that place, that the people come into our place, into Europe, without us putting parameters in place for them to become successful European patriots. That is the key operation. Actually, Elza wrote an article about that not too long ago for the Huffington Post. Europe's Next Frontier. It is patriotism. Is how do you teach these Muslim youth French patriotism, Belgian patriotism, German patriotism? Okay? That is something that Europe itself shies away from because of their history. You know, patriotism, nationalism, all of a sudden it's going to bring up the German identity, the French identity. And well, you're being passive unless you address the pathologies and what made you repress these. You're just being passive about the whole thing, and it's just going to fester into a bigger problem. So I don't know if that answers the whole question, but there needs to be a more critical eye put on the refugee issue in general.
Yeah, and I think not everybody wants to stay in Europe. As soon as they don't have fear to survive in their own countries. They will come back. There was, when was it? Yesterday, somebody, I don't remember, it said finally, and it was in our dinner party yesterday, finally in Europe, somebody feels how they feel all the time in these countries. This fear of not being safe, of being able to be assaulted from everywhere. This is their reality, and we make such a big thing as if we say the world goes disappears, you know. So maybe it might be also good for our nations to understand how well we are off, how our life is safe, and that other people don't have this safety, and that we might really not so much be preoccupied about ourselves, but create safety for them. Not necessarily in our countries, but help to create the safety there. And that's more or less what you are saying, no? To address the topics. And we have when you said German identity, you know, and we have still a problem with that. And I felt like, oops, when you said
that brings up ideas of German patriotism. That harkens back to, you know, the last century, you know, and all the terrible troubles that arose out of that patriotism.
Then, you know, back to what really the platform that we're dealing with here is integral values. Where's the integration in Europe? Other than the surface egalitarian manifestation. We let them in, but we don't really care much for what they do. We don't bother to educate them. In France, it's a closed 6-level system. They let them in and they say, you have to assimilate into the culture. We know French culture is the best. You have to speak the language. You have to, and without giving them additional skills or education to develop their capacities to become that. You just sort of throw them in, and that is a crime in itself. The West is the more advanced culture that has a responsibility towards its younger siblings in humanity to make sure they evolve properly. And we're just too concerned about our own guilt.
I have many Arab French friends in Paris. They tell me whenever they see Muhammad, for example, Muhammad resume, CV, they throw it in the garbage.
That's not integration.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you know, the French leaders should be more in alignment with the wishes of their people. I think I posted something a couple weeks ago about a research that Pew Research did not too long ago to show that over 46% of French don't want any more Muslims to come to the culture. Okay? And it's not because they're hateful, it's because their leaders force it down their throats without proper engagement. And that's the source of the problem. That is what's going to be the next challenge, not the idea that it's either a yes or a no on the immigration issue. It's an issue of a greater degree of integration and understanding.
How many Turks do you have in your parliament, Heidi? In Germany's parliament?
Kurds?
Turks.
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 I don't know how many.
A few.
But they are in leading positions. Yeah, I don't think the Turks are so much the problem. Many of them have integrated. Some maybe not. I'm not anymore in Germany for a long time, so I'm not first-hand information in that. But I know that many have integrated and some have not. And as you say, Said, I mean, I see it in my own little way. I had here people, Romanians and other in my house for a long time, and I just threw them in and let them do. And then afterwards I was angry because they didn't respect my property and things like that. And I had to learn it, that if you take somebody in like that, you have to take care of them and give your values very clear, make sure that they respect them and so on. And when we are in this green mindset of letting go, this is more like to take your own responsibility for what is happening. Yes. And they're the bad ones, you know. And
yeah, don't assume that immigrants from a culture with lower complexity will automatically assimilate into a culture of higher complexity. Europe did not naturally assimilate. It was through a lot of bloodshedding and centuries of evolution that it got to where it is. Yeah, they don't have the patience to show their immigrants the proper way to integrate. That's the crime. Have an association. You have, immigration and the culture's ability to train them on how to become responsible citizens of that country should go hand in hand. If you can't do it, stop immigration. Stop it immediately till you're able to do it. That's how you're going to keep the French people in alignment with the French leaders in alignment with the values of the wishes of their people. Otherwise, there are going to be all kinds of internal.
There's the kind of veneer in the EU where there's a real distance between the rhetoric and the official policies that come from Brussels and the actual realities in all the countries of the EU. And this is absolutely bound to come back and bite people in the butt because they're out of touch. There's no organic kind of connection between so much of ordinary life and the very glossy, glitzy, green veneer of Brussels. So it's not only, say, within the French society or within German society, but it's a common to much of modern European culture. Yeah.
So Brussels is the seat of the EU.
And did I miss something?
Brussels is the headquarters of the EU.
Yes. That's when I say Brussels, I mean the EU, the superstructure, the administration. Yes.
Well, to me, Mark, it seems like Europe stopped working at evolving themselves at the end of World War II. It's like the war is over. We're all tired of war, and now we passively accept everything else that happens. You want people to come? Sure. You want us to put a front showing that we're tolerant? Sure. Don't ask us to do the hard work. And to me, that's how it's been.
I think they stopped evolving their consciousness. More.
Integration. I mean, immigrant integration really requires an integral seventh level perspective on things. You cannot, what France is looking to do, and Dr. Beck, I wish he was on the call. He uses the example of what a green sixth level system does. It mushes everybody together to make them look like one color or one consistency, while a yellow system, a truly integral system, recognizes the differences and the uniqueness in every cultural grouping, but it aligns them towards a common flow, a natural system that does not allow them to fall in the cracks of terrorism or allows them to become arrested systems from which they can never emerge.
Okay, I have overseen that we have quite a bit of comments here, and I want to read the one from Dave Moore. He says, is it possible to integrate people into a country if they have no interest in any other culture, religion, or beliefs than their own? In the UK, this is a major problem, as there are thousands of people now settled into communities and believe they can live here without integration and will not abide by our laws or regulations and want to impose their own beliefs, religion, and laws on this country. What would you do about that?
Dave, with all due respect, I think that is a European governing issue rather than Muslims looking for a new place to live. You have to assess these people ahead of time, and if the culture collectively does not want closed system Muslims to immigrate, they should say so. If they feel that these are educated Muslims who can integrate well into the culture, they should put in place measures that can tell them whether these people are an open system or not. One of the issues that Elza brought up in talking about Syria was that Assad never allowed radical imams to preach. The Wahhabi brand of Islam, which is the primary funder of madrasas all throughout the Middle East, North Africa, and Afghanistan. These are the people who preach radical Islam and hate. Assad, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, many parts of the Middle East who are aware of these imams' destructive abilities don't allow them into their countries. Okay, who allows them into their countries? The Europeans. Where do the French go to get their imams? North Africa. The poorer the country, the more the Saudi Wahhabis are capable of penetrating that culture, setting up madrasas for their kids, paying off the corrupt politicians for them to teach these kids radical Islam. That is at the heart of the issue. Structurally, or what we call functionally, this is what has to be addressed. So Europe has to be a little more sophisticated in how they decide on who they allow to integrate from the leadership, and that's really a huge higher consciousness level of governance, and they have to look to make sure that whoever their imams are get integrated into some kind of a European imam training system. This whole idea that you can preach whatever you want and the freedom of speech and all that, it is done with provisos. When we created the freedom of speech, we thought that the entire world is at the 4th level of development or higher. The Middle East is not. And if your religion tells you to kill an infidel who is a non-Muslim, freedom of speech is not going to matter. Freedom of nothing's going to stop you, because your perception is that is my 4th level system of being. I derive my values towards law and institution from my religion. And if that religion is a radicalized form of Islam, there's a huge problem.
Yeah, and there's another comment from Hans, and he in Germany is working with refugees. Mm-hmm. And he says, what do you want to read?
I do understand what you are saying about Assad being the lesser evil from a viewpoint of spiral dynamics. However, many of the Syrian refugees here in Berlin tell me that they are fleeing from the Assad regime rather than from ISIS. How does that
go together?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, this is the the bad side of Assad. As long as he ruled with an iron fist of his people, and as long as you weren't, that shows you how closed the system was under him. It was so closed that the smallest fracture in it made it go crazy, and that's exactly what happened. So
I think he trained Al-Qaeda members, and he sent them to Iraq as well.
He wasn't an angel. They played all sides of the cards. But back to the question, the people that are fleeing, Assad is realizing this is a survival issue for him. He comes from the minority Alawite sect, and as long as he was in power, sectarianism prevailed. Don't mess with me. I'm giving you sectarianism, but in return, I'm repressing everything that an evolved culture stands for. If that includes, you being sent to a prison that's a concentration camp, if you say something bad about the political system, that's part and parcel of what he did. So when you begin to see cracks in that system, he's bombing the majority of the culture that is Sunni. and the majority of Syrians are Sunnis. Here's a leader who was Alawite. Alawites are what, 10%?
Shia.
Yeah, Alawites are a sect of Shia, and they represent under 10% of the Syrian population. Less than that.
5%.
Yeah. So when cracks in the system show like that, very typical behavior of Red. You know, after me, was it a French?
Après moi le déluge.
Après moi le déluge. After me the deluge. That's it. He's losing power and leave a scorched earth behind, and that is what he's doing.
And you have Hezbollah in Lebanon. ISIS went to Dahieh, a suburb of Hezbollah, and bombed 2 places in the suburb of Hezbollah.
Yeah. And they're doing that because Hezbollah is supporting Assad and providing him with military support, soldiers, material, and otherwise. So yeah. But you know, the only other comment I want to add to the gentleman's observation about the people fleeing Assad is that the possibility of bringing him back and empowering him. I know we said a few things about that. I think he's gone beyond that. He's your typical third-level feudalistic, bloodthirsty leader. He lost power. He's not going to forgive and forget if he's brought back to power. He's going to, if he's re-empowered to be reinstalled, he's going to very likely take the opportunity to annihilate many of the ones who rebelled against him. So it's a very, very, very tough situation to be in deciding whether to keep him, whether to replace him, because if you keep him, there's that possibility. If you replace him, the place is going to become another Iraq, and ISIS is going to march on to Lebanon and be on the Israeli border within 72 hours. So those are the realities of the Middle East.
Scott is asking a question.
Yeah. Scott is asking.
And Scott's asking, second-tier governance would look dramatically different than a green governance.
Yes.
How would a second-tier governance respond to the refugee situation?
Okay.
Well,
so we'll use the natural design formula. How does who lead, market, sell to whom, to do what?
Govern in this case.
Yeah. To do what? The superordinate goal of the region, and where. So what is the superordinate goal of the region? Is it a win for the Israelis, a win for the Palestinians, a win for the whole region, or is it a win for the Arab Spring? So we assess the value systems of the whom. What value system the Syrian refugee is under? It's a different value system. It's a variation of value systems, and the who is leading this. Who is in the leadership position for these refugees? And the how, we assess how the kind of leadership or the type of leadership needed for the who and whom.
So that's basically the integral governance design formula.
Yeah.
To bring it home down to what if we were in charge of advising. What if second-tier thinkers were in charge of advising the UN and what if they were in charge of designing the whole governance issue around the refugee issue, period, and that whatever our designs say will be done without regard to, oh, you can't do it because of this. Ideally, here's what will happen. A second-tier solution will be to send someone into Syria to create a non-fly safe zone, be it the size of a city, be it the size of a county, in Syria, protected by every possible power in the world, from penetration, from terrorists, from ISIS, from Assad himself. Set up a place where second-tier leaders or a safe haven in the area that they're in, because many of these people just want to go home after the conflict is over. It is very difficult for a lot of people to assimilate.
Many NGOs picked up and left South Africa.
Yeah, after the conflict was over. So the idea that you can set something up in the region itself that is a safe haven for refugees, that they can stay temporarily till the conflict is resolved, is absolutely the first place that I would start.
We need to assess the various value systems of the refugees as well in Europe.
Yeah. So yeah, for the ones who come to Europe, as Elza said, there has to be a full assessment of their values. If they and these will be, you know, direct, indirect questions asked of them to determine if they have the potential to become terrorists or not.
And the opposition, as you well know, Marshall.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. The opposition, as you well know, is divided. No one person is coming up as a leader of the opposition.
And that's the big problem with the whole Middle East, is that when you're led by a brutal dictator, even your cronies, the next people in command, don't show up to take leadership after you, because you know you can't trust because everybody wants to kill you to become that. So no one rises to the occasion. And because of that fall of the third level leadership structure, because we get rid of it altogether, it creates a vacuum. It defaults the culture back to chaos, to tribes that have no direction, and that's, you know, give them weapons, and that's the basis of what's happening in Syria, Iraq, and all throughout the Middle East.
I think Arab Spring turned into Arab Winter, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hi, Neri. Do we have time for Neri's question, Heidi?
Just now, unmute microphone. Here we are. Finally, we got it to unmute ourselves.
Okay. We've been in enforced silence. We had to listen to you. Sorry. Yes. Okay. But Neri says, does this migration area meme drain, and the Syrian society after war would be very weak?
Yes.
Should we have one Syria, or maybe it's better to have separation? In another direction, can the Syrian emigrant will be Assyrian patriots to go back and build Syria? So the question is, one Syria, 2, 3, how many?
I think Syria will be divided as semi-autonomous Kurdistan, because Kurds did not allow the Syrian what is it called? Al-Jamhuriya Al-Arabiya Syria.
Yeah,
the Republic of
the Republic Nation of Syria.
No, Arabic.
No, the Arab Republic of Syria.
Yeah, the Arab Republic of Syria. So many Kurds did not have IDs. So it will be divided, semi-autonomous Kurdistan and Sunni in the middle, and eventually Assad will take the coastal cities, like Tartus, Latakia.
That's where the Shia and his sect were, the Alawites. That's where their stronghold is. So it really gets divided along Shia, Sunni, Kurdish lines, which should have been the wise design that the French and the British left us with back in the 1930s. The wisdom of colonialism.
Well, I can't fault the French and the British too much.
Yeah,
when I look at all the straight lines of the American states, all those square places that were just drawn before anybody cared about whoever was living there earlier. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be a pattern of power.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are at the end of the hour, and we invite everybody to come over to Blab in about 20 minutes and talk with us about these topics which have come here. The link, I will post it again in the event page. It's very low down on the event page. If you scroll down, you will find it.
Down.
Yeah, and then I want to repeat my request. If you like this work we are doing and that we are bringing experts to you and having talks which are interesting, would you like to support us a little bit? And I've created a crowdfund campaign, www.patreon.com/Heidi63, and we would invite you to go there. There are wonderful gifts in, how do you say, recambio, in exchange
Yes,
for your support. Yeah, we would be very grateful. So we can go on with that work, which is really enthusiastic. How do we say?
We're enthusiastic.
Yeah, enthusiastic about it, but sooner or later we need to work for get some money. So if we can go along with that, it would be wonderful.
And even though it says Heidi 56, I'll get some of it too. Okay.
Okay.
That's wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, you too. And maybe before the new year we can set up another one, and with Don Beck, hopefully he can join us.
Yeah.
And hopefully he has success with his speech in Israel and the parliament.
The Knesset,
Yeah. So thank you very much, and hop over to Blab, talk with us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. And enjoy the rest of your day. Yes.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care.